Imagine travelling overseas and witnessing a small child with an iron collar around its neck being forced to perform circus tricks. Well, most of us would be horrified. But what if instead of a child you saw a monkey? Would you pay to watch?
Pay the man for the photo with the monkey and he'll keep poaching them from the wild. Give money to the man with the dancing bear and he'll torture more to make them perform. Behind the scenes, there's a lot going on that we don't know about. Ask yourself, how are the animals being treated when all the tourists have gone home? And how did they coerce an animal into doing something that clearly terrifies them?
Organisations like WSPA, the World Society for the Protection of Animals, are urging tourists to cease supporting cruelty to animals by becoming compassionate travellers. It's a cause close to Dr. Julie Summerfield's heart, and she joins us this morning. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning, Dr. Julie. It's horrifying when you see it like that, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's that likening to a child, people would be horrified, but somehow it can be perceived as cute. And I think when people go on holiday too, everything's wonderful. And I travelled around Thailand doing that documentary, and it was kind of like seeing the country from the inside out and what goes on there. And a lot of times people support these things inadvertently.
Yeah.
They're actually animal lovers, but they don't stop and think, oh, how is this animal being made to do this trick?
Well, they take the photo, don't they?
Or they take the photo, and by giving the person money, they're actually sustaining that business because, you know, in a lot of cases these people are poor and it's an income for them, but what they're not realising or they're ignorant to is the cruelty involved. I mean, making animals do things that are completely unnatural usually involves either being drugged or being harshly trained, and I don't think if people knew what went on behind the scenes, they wouldn't want to support these things.
Also, it's not always just happening in developing countries either, is it?
Absolutely not. There's animal cruelty everywhere. It's not, you know, I mean, in certain places it's probably more common, and it is thankfully becoming less of an issue as people are more aware. For example, you know, the dancing bears that used to be seen in Greece and Turkey a lot no longer exist because tourists became aware and just didn't support it. So obviously that business is going away. But yes, even in our own country we have cruelty issues. But so it's not. This documentary is not about criticising other people and other countries. It's about us as travellers being aware and making animal-friendly choices and not supporting those things.
So what about things like if you're in Thailand, or if you, just for want of a better example, someone comes up to you and says, "Would you like a ride on the elephant?"
Well, yeah, that's the thing that you do have to be cautious about. And people think, oh, that's a wonderful experience to have. And on the surface, yes, it is. But how are those animals being treated? That's what you've got to know. Because we saw a lot of elephants that they're such big, expensive animals to keep. And the people that keep them have very little education about what they need. And so they often suffer injuries. They're not fed properly. They don't get veterinary care. So they're the things you need to keep in the back of your mind before you're supporting that.
What other work is WSPA doing?
Well, they've got sort of three elements of what they're doing. As I mentioned, education, so they're educating the mahouts on these valuable assets, these elephants, these working animals, so teaching them how to take care of them. Mobile clinics set up to treat animals in remote places, and neutering clinics, because I visited Phuket amongst other places, and a lot of places the animals are just breeding out of control because people, you know, don't have the money or don't have the knowledge to de-sex, and often they are just stray animals. Actually, I went out to an island, and it was interesting because the island was it had just been abandoned with an economic downturn, and all the staff's dogs had been left behind and left to breed, and so we went out there. There was no one, a couple of people living there, but we went out to neuter, so I sort of got down and dirty and hands-on and did some operating as well, so that was great. So there's that, and they set up sanctuaries as well, so they've got lots of member societies. Yeah, that's in Phuket. It was actually on a bar of a disused resort that we were operating, so very, very nice view, very different to the operating theatre that you normally have.
Yes, not quite the scrubs you used to.
No, and Other things that we went out in the streets having to dart some, you know, less cooperative dogs that didn't like the idea of coming in to be desexed. Yeah, they're doing so much good work.
Just getting back to other things that we might experience when we're overseas that we should be aware of. I mean, you see blood sports. I mean, I suppose you would include things like bullfights and...
Absolutely, yeah. I think, you know, that, well, it's still a really common thing for people to go and see, and those sorts of things. I think if people just stop and think what they're supporting, then hopefully those things won't exist soon. I know that there's a cultural aspect to it, but...
Well, there is. And I, when I was in Spain for the Olympics in '92, we went along to a bullfight for the express purpose of seeing it and actually being able to have a comment on it. And it's amazing watching the crowd, how they're all drawn in. They speak about it as though it's a ballet, you know, all of these moves and the oohs and the ahs. You know, at the end of the day, every time the poor animal goes past the matador and the toreador, it has the muscles between its shoulder blades sliced with darts and with weapons to weaken it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just absolute outright cruelty.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's the unintentional cruelty of just supporting something that you're a bit ignorant about what's going on, but then there's that which is, you know, obvious cruelty. And I personally, I think that any culture, you know, I don't put culture into it. I think if something's cruel, something's cruel.
Oh, but it's not just it wasn't just the bulls either. It's the horses that are involved as well, and the horses are wearing a protective gear, but they often die because they get speared by the horse's horns, you know, and they're drugged so they stay calm. So there's that whole issue of performing animals being drugged too.
Absolutely. And souvenirs as well. You know, they're all things that I think really at the end of the day people need to realise that they've got the power as a tourist, you know, with money to say no to these things.
Look, you've been involved in the documentary. The documentary's on Network 10 this Saturday, 2:30 p.m. It's called The Compassionate Traveller. It's really worth a look. Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Julie.
We'll be back after this.